welcome to Hard NOC Life. I'm Keith Chow.
I'm Shawn Taylor.
Hi, I'm Dominic Ma.
What's up, y'all? I'm Jamal Michelle.
We are back. Thank you for joining us once again. We got the whole crew together. Got a lot to talk about. Thank you for tuning in. What's going on, fellas? How you doing?
Oh, man, just battling with people who loved WandaVision on Twitter all day.
I thought you liked episode 4, Shawn.
Episode 4 was cool. I won't say that I'm like head over heels about it. I mean, it's just not for me. Yeah. I mean, people are talking about, you're trying to expect the Marvel movies. No, I'm not. I'm thinking about how dope Daredevil was the first 3 episodes, and how dope Luke Cage was the first 3 episodes, and how dope Jessica Jones was the first 3 episodes.
And all told, you don't even like Marvel movies, Shawn.
And I'm not a Marvel movie person. I'm not so much. I mean, I love the Captain America films to death. I think those are the best of the best. Mm-hmm. And and I don't even like Captain America as a character, and I love the 3 Captain America movies. The first 2, I thought the 2 Ant-Man movies were hilarious. Outside of, you know how I feel about Guardians of the Galaxy.
Not a fan.
And I love Ragnarok, and that's really about it.
What about Spider-Man?
I like this, but I don't really consider them part of that whole thing. But I love Tom Holland, the Spider-Man. I think those 2 movies are absolutely amazing. But Spider-Verse is still better.
Oh, the best. The absolute best.
It's incredible.
I'm going to die on that hill. Good Lord.
But Dominic, we've talked about your thoughts on the Tom Holland Spider-Man in the past.
Yeah, I'm not so into this current version of Spider-Man. You know, he's all right. I mean, some YouTube guy put it well that he's like, you know, playing a 15-year-old who's really a 13-year-old or something. It's just that part of it that bugs me. But again, his physicality is great.
Yeah.
And Zendaya is great.
And she's having a moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's great.
Jamal, last week you hadn't seen WandaVision. Are you? I know, and I don't think you're caught up quite yet.
No, so I saw the first episode, okay, and I could not continue.
Well,
listen, I am really like, it sucks because, I mean, like Shawn mentioned, I had an expectation. And that's because of the label that comes with it, you know, Marvel, and I'm just thinking and expecting a certain thing. But what really takes me out is like the classic sitcom, and I know like the laugh track and stuff, and I know this was something different, but I personally, aside from the Marvel stuff, let's put that aside, I never liked black and white, old classic sitcom. Like, I had never been a fan of that to begin with, so it was really tough. But also after the beginning of the first episode, I was like, what? And there was just like 30 seconds of that strange scene in the first episode at the dinner table. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I like where this is going. But then it goes right back to the campy. Oh, man. So I needed to take a break. Even though it was very short, that first episode, I don't know.
You're not sure you're going to keep going?
No, I feel like now I have to. That's just how it is. Like, I have to. Yeah. Need to see it through. But I don't know what to expect. I really don't.
I mean, not to spoil, since episode 4 just dropped. And they do the sitcom trope for 3 straight episodes, which we argued about last week. Episode 4 is probably the most Marvel movie-esque of the 4 episodes. I mean, it's the one where you're taken out of that, like, sitcom reality into, like, the real world of the Marvel universe. And, you know, again, not to spoil, but I saw a lot of commentary online this week about how they should have started with episode 4.
Much like the original Star Wars.
I kind of disagree with that sentiment just because, like, I actually found that the most recent episode the least interesting, but that's probably because I'm the outlier in this group and I liked the black and white stuff.
Yeah, there's a guy in Forbes, I think his name is Paul Tass. He has a thing about WandaVision isn't too slow. Everyone forgot how to watch television. And I'm like, that's kind of arrogant because some of us sat through Lost and X-Files, and there's nothing slower in the history of television than those 2 shows. You were talking about slow burn. Yeah. That's like time-dilated molasses.
Although I do think that guy's point, I do take that guy's point in the sense that I do prefer the week-to-week release. I know a lot of people in the Netflix space, they like having the whole season dropped all at once. I prefer the slow burn of watching an episode a week. That's why I like The Mandalorian. That's what I liked about Game of Thrones. To me, it makes it feel more event TV. You know, like...
No, absolutely.
The problem with Netflix is that, like, even the Marvel Netflix shows is that, like... Dominic, you and I have talked about this. You can't have conversations about it because it's like... You don't know where people are. Like some folks, like as soon as the whole season drops, they stay up till like 6 a.m. to watch the whole thing. Some people take their time watching the show.
Right, you can't compete with that.
We've all paused at a different time. And the week-to-week thing sets up a rhythm. But, you know, it's not about like, well, WandaVision is a slow burn thing. It's actually fast-forwarding through decades of television, expecting you to go with that joke.
Yeah.
And for some, that's a clever vibe. And, for, you know, I'm not sold on it's a clever vibe yet.
Yeah.
I think that's just so tough to keep up with on the one hand, I want that. I want all the episodes once. I want you to drop the whole slate. But at the same time, like for writers like ourselves, I feel like it ups the competitive edge. Like who's going to be the outlet to post their whole take on the like entirety, like a holistic take. Right. And I'm just like, no, I'm not going to stay up until 6 a.m. watching the damn series. No. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, the one thing I like about that is because it's actually forcing slow journalism. I think that you can't do a whole season hot take. You have to actually, because I'm a big fan, because even on the site, I post rarely now is because I'm only going to post about things that I've actually spent time with and that I like. Unless it's harmful. If it's harmful, gender, race, sexuality wise, then I'm going to make sure that artist never works again. I'm going to try my best to make sure that they never work again, right? I'm going to just destroy them if I can. But no, I mean, because I think art is too powerful to use to hurt people, you know what I'm saying? But if it's like for this is actually forcing folks to kind of like, wait a minute, I can't do a hot take because I have no idea how it connects. That's why I'm loving this season of The Expanse as well, even though the Marco Inaros things is taking a little bit too long to get through in The Expanse just a little bit. But I love the week to week thing. So I'm like, oh, now I have this chance to actually really sit with the story for a week. And so now at the end of the season, I have this, 5,000 word thing I want to write about season 5. And I'm like, now I'll be able to write the entire thing instead of trying to play who's got the quickest take, as you were saying earlier. And I just don't think that, and I don't think that fan properties even deserve to have massive takes, like those quick takes. I think the hot take has like made fandom into like a bunch of Rick and Morty assholes. And I just think that's a problem for me. Like if we can slow down a little bit, actually give it some critical thought, actually apply, some finesse to the writing and to the critique, that gives it more latitude, as opposed to where most of these hot takes like shrink fan properties down to nothing.
I really love that take, Shawn, because I was thinking about that earlier today. No,
it seemed like it was very well thought out.
Yeah, really, you took your time with that, no pun intended. But I genuinely agree, because I was on the site earlier and I was drafting something. I wanted to write about something, and then I was thinking, like, man, I haven't written in a while. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because I do want to sit and critically analyze something. And I think that's just the educator that's coming out of us when we're like, hold on, let's take a moment to sit down and parse and break this thing apart. And it does justice to the art itself, because I think about Tenet, and I know some of us don't like that, but
still haven't watched it. My Blu-ray arrived last week. It's been sitting there, so I haven't watched it.
No, you're good. I think you'd appreciate it, but the hot takes like missed all the points, right? And then people are playing catch up after the movie came out. Besides the debacle with the release, I noticed people are like trickling in with later thoughts, but no one's really paying attention because the trend is gone. So it sucks to have to be on this trendy. If it's trending, we got to talk about it now, as opposed to let it marinate and like what else can we take from it.
I mean, that's an excellent point too, because like in talking about the impermanence of pop culture, a lot of these the Netflix effect is that these shows burn hot really fast and then they go away and then they're completely out of the zeitgeist. Like, no one gives a shit about Stranger Things anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
oh my god!
It's not like there was,
except for my 12-year-old.
Well, but,
oh my god!
But there's no. It's not like we always talk about the death of the monoculture. Part of that is like everything is niche now, right? But like it's also that these things burn hot and they go away. Queen's Gambit was like this huge thing like 2 months ago, and now no one gives a shit about that. You know what I mean? Like it's because these things because once you've watched all 10 episodes. You're kind of, it's like in and out, you're done. And there's no reason to go back and rethink about anything. There's no
more coins for The Witcher.
Yeah.
There's no more coins for The Witcher. Because people forgot about The Witcher. Except for because a black woman's being cast in the prequel and people are losing their minds. But yeah.
Y'all are dropping so many truth bombs. I'm hearing like The Witcher and Queen's Gambit and Stranger Things, and I'm in that like, whoa, I stopped thinking about it. Holy crap, it goes away. And I honest to goodness, that really sucks. I wish we weren't in that I wish the zeitgeist wasn't in freaking hyperdrive. Like I wish it slowed down so we can consume it and appreciate it. Because you might get to something like, let's say Selma, or even remember Watchmen and you know, When They See Us, those things are going to fall in line with like trending as well. If we do that, if we just burn through them, we'll talk about them, we'll be super like pissed, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the system did this to these boys, or oh my gosh, can't believe I learned these things about Dr. King. And then next week we're like, holy shit, Adventure Time, you know, or isn't that such a strange shift to jump from one of those to another? But
you know, you bring up Watchmen, and it's you know, that was one of the, because it was an HBO show, it came out once a week, and you know, the conversation between Sunday to Sunday was where all of the deep dives came from, and that's why I think that show will have a permanence beyond just the day it drops, and then, you know, everyone, you know, there's, like you said, the competition, who's going to watch the whole thing before everybody else. But you know, when you can have this slow kind of like thoughtful conversation from week to week, from episode to episode, anticipating Sunday night at 9 p.m. because you know some like dope shit's about to happen, you don't get that with streaming, you know. And I think that's, you know, what Disney Plus and HBO Max is trying to do with the whole like slow release instead of dropping all at once. But again, it's just different people's, like, I think there's a whole generation of people who are used to like the Netflix model, and it's weird because, you know, we're all old heads on here. Like, we remember when you had to, like, you know, tell the time by what was on TV. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, TV Guide channel. Remember TV Guide channel?
Or running to the bathroom at commercials, like going like, oh my God, okay, get back here, hurry up! I remember, like, I have a permanent scar on my foot to this day watching Airwolf with my uncle, and I had to go to the bathroom. He's like, it's back on, and I ran and I hit the table and like sliced my foot on the top.
Wow.
All for Jan Michael Vincent.
All for Jan Michael Vincent and the Airwolf, man.
Airwolf.
You have to wonder where do the water cooler conversations happen now?
That's my point.
Right?
Like,
because
there aren't any,
like,
right? I mean, there's no
Slack.
water coolers anymore because everybody's
right. That's even that comparison, even that itself is just like dated.
Yeah.
But do people even have these conversations anymore where we're like, yo, did you see that episode yesterday or whatever? We'll text each other. Right. You know, it'll happen.
Yeah.
Or we podcast about
such separate moments. Yeah.
Or
the podcast would be the new water cooler.
We should rename this podcast.
But there's so many things that are missing, right? Because it's like, you know, as somebody who's a huge music fan, like music stores where I met some of my best friends in the world at the record store, whether it was in the magazine aisle or was in the actual music aisle. And we don't even have these places. So since culture is so like ephemeral now, like there's no physical response or physical interaction with the culture. We watch it, we stream it, and it's done. Whereas I had to get in the car, the bus, the subway, whatever, to go to Fat Beats, go to the record store, go to wherever. Then I'll meet somebody in the aisle. Oh, you got this MF Doom. Oh, you got this people under the stairs. Let's talk about it. And then I made my best friends to this day because of music stores. You know, Tower, Amoeba, Fat Beats, whatever. And now it's just like, you're in your house, you watch the stuff, you basically buy all this equipment to make your house like a theater. Like me, I bought a sound bar, subwoofers. My house is rattling. I'm sure my neighbors hate me right now. But I've made this like insular thing where I don't really have to ever go out again. And now I'm getting first run releases into my house.
You're also not going to go out, right? Like you're now literally going to stay in there. You're not going to meet people. You're not going to talk.
And it's like there's something sad about the death of our Publix, because pop culture used to be our Publix. Now it's hyper siloed in a way I think that is completely unhealthy for it.
You know where these conversations are happening? On Reddit.
Speaking
of Reddit, that's true. They're not happening at GameStop stores, but they are happening at Reddit. That's my awkward segue into the next topic.
Hashtag dope segue.
I was gonna mention that GameStop.
That's the other thing. You know, you mentioned nerds with power, and the big story for me, I've been fascinated this entire week by this whole Reddit taking over Wall Street story, and I just wanted to hear you guys' take on it. But for those of you who are listening and have not heard about it, first of all, what rock are you guys living under? Second of all, this is probably the biggest story of the weekend, and essentially there was a subreddit that is called Wall Street Bets, where a bunch of people decided we're going to start infusing the GameStop, which is everyone's favorite video game retailer. We're going to start infusing their stock. You know, we're going to buy it up because a bunch of hedge funds had bet against it. Basically, hedge funds work in that they short sell a stock when they think a business is going to go under, and that if the business goes under, I mean, there's all this complicated stuff, but essentially if the business goes under, these hedge funds make a whole shit ton of money. And so what these guys on Reddit decided to do is we're going to just like artificially inflate the stock of GameStop so that these hedge funds will start losing money. And GameStop stock went up like 2,000%. It was like $7 trading last week, and now it was like trading at $400 a share. It was this insane markup. And on the one hand, these edgelords on Reddit were also like creating an artificial bubble that's going to bankrupt a lot of the same people they essentially empowering. But on the other hand, they were also making all of these hedge funds like shit their pants and beg the government to intervene and have some regulation on Wall Street, for God's sake. And so anyways, that's the background. And then the apps that people were using to buy these trays, these like
Robinhood and all that
had to shut down and stuff like that. So, AOC and Ted Cruz are both like on the same side.
Right, like what? Who wrote this? Who wrote this arc? What the hell?
So anyway, that's the general, and I might be getting some of the details wrong. We'll talk about it. But what was you guys' opinion about the whole Wall Street bets?
I have not followed and been more into stocks and the market than I have this whole week. I'm really on some Wolf of Wall Street shit. Like the whole week I have been reading and following this subreddit, looking at my ears to the ground. I'm just like, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Don't sell. Literally got one share. And I'm like, I'm in this. Let's see if I can bankroll some stuff. But it really is crazy, the idea of trying to stick it to the man. And yeah, I think edgelords is correct in the language that they use. And a lot of the commentary is just, not only beyond problematic, but that's like a separate conversation to have, But what they're like, their intent is like, whoa, how are you this, intentional and like thoughtful in certain things at the same time? It was like a lot of cognitive dissonance because a lot of these dudes are dropping in the subreddit a bunch of like donation trips that they've done to like children's hospitals and to like soup kitchens and charities. And I'm just like, whoa. So you you speak very problematic, but then you're doing these really thoughtful things. And so I'm just like, what the hell? And I also thought that this was just a bubble that was going to pop, I'm thinking like this is just some shit that's artificial. It's going to go away, but they have more control than I thought. And this game is corrupt would have to be the word. I can't believe people could even do what the hedge funders are doing. I hope they lose all the money.
Well, when this whole thing happened, Shawn, you were the first person I thought about because I know that, your whole raison d'etre is like how to like essentially weaponize fandoms, right? Like how can we take the
leverage fandoms.
I think Captain America would argue that leverage itself is a weapon. But
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
I'm just nitpicking.
It's essentially like, what if fanboys, but for good, right? Like it's like if Gamergate was actually a good thing, you know what I mean? You can take the power of fandom and like point it to something and then like destroy it. Because I think, there's two things that need regulation here. Like ultimately, like the end of the story is Wall Street needs to be regulated and, social media needs to be regulated because yes, like it's good that we're taking down all these hedge funds and taking down Wall Street. But again, it's not, Wall Street Bets is not unlike Gamergate, where you get a bunch of edgelords in a subreddit, and instead of deciding to take this hedge fund down, they decide to take this female game developer down, and it's the same weaponization, right? Like,
no, it's the same impulse.
Yeah,
it's like there's something there that we don't like. We're gonna take action against it. And I think what this also shows is the absolute ridiculous fiction that the economy is, and that trying to judge a healthy economy by the stock market is literally the dumbest thing. And any Harvard MBA and the rest, they're just literally charlatans. Because the only reason we have an economy is because we all believe it. Right? We're all participating in this act of fiction. I mean, like, it's so funny because people are talking about, like, the inflated stock price of GameStop. And I'm like, well, yeah, it's like you give them an $80 game, you get $10 back. Of course it's going to be wild. At games, of course it's going to be wild at GameStop. But this idea that fans or whoever, they weren't fans of a particular thing. I guess maybe video game players.
Well, but I think the reason they chose GameStop is that it's fandom of like games. Yeah. It's like we're going to choose this ridiculous stock because we like going to GameStops, right? Like that's it was one, like the memification of the stock market, but also I think there's a reason why like it's GameStop and AMC theaters. It's like it's these stocks that have some sort of resonance for like nerds like us. You know what I'm saying? It's not they're not just choosing like,
absolutely
pets.com. They're choosing
like Dogecoin.
Dogecoin's another one. It's like very much like internet culture, meme culture, nerd culture.
Yeah. And it's also the funny thing. This whole thing is actually kind of like meta culture because they're commenting on the commentary in a lot of ways, and it's this interesting thing about how they're setting themselves up. But what I'm really concerned is, like you were saying earlier, Keith, was that if we wanted to use those powers for good, there's a lot we could do because we saw it with the K-pop fans, we saw it with people, we saw it with TikTokers, we saw it with all these people that if fans of a certain thing use it en masse for a particular result, you can get that result. Right. And the question you have to wonder is, what is so, like, these edgelords, are just so, like, while I'm kind of rooting for them, and I have to be honest about that, but there's this sense of entitlement around it.
Yeah.
This sense of, this is our sandbox that also reminds me of why so many women have been run off the internet by people like this. As well, so I'm having a lot of conflicting emotions right now.
Well, reasonably so, because that's part of the dangerous part of the gamer mentality too. There's an entitlement aspect. It's like, I want it exactly this way right now, and I can make it so, and that goes along with the culture. I do like. It's funny. It's like they created a fanfic in which GameStop was the most important stock in the universe, and just made it so. But can we also take a moment just to appreciate that it was all about GameStop, which is like this special antiquated place, like the most like obsolete part of the most, modern part of our, pop culture genres. Just like the brick and mortar store where you go and do stuff like you were talking at the music store. For whatever, for better or for worse, some of us grew up with like chain toy stores, and we can argue whether like it's important whether they're Toys R Us or KB. Is that an important part of society? Who knows? But the sense of the atmosphere is similar to what you get to going into a GameSpot. It's like it's like a wondrous little world where, like, with action figures.
It's like Radio Shack's son.
Totally.
I'm actually rooting for, like, inflating the stock of GameStop would actually turn into GameStop becoming a successful business again, right? Like that's how I want it to end. Because I'm the same way, Dominic. I love GameStop. I'm not a gamer. I love GameStop for the action figures. Like, to your point, there's no more Toys R Us. There's no more KB toys. So there's no retail store that has like action figures on the shelves on a consistent basis the way GameStop.
Which is so funny you say that, because I was looking forever for the high-end Nightwing, and then they had it at GameStop on sale. And I was looking everywhere. I was like, oh, that's mine. I'm going to cop that right now at GameStop, of all places.
Because, to your point about fiction, though, like GameStop being worth $400 a share or whatever the price was when it was at its peak isn't going to translate to, like, stores opening, to employees getting bonuses, to whatever, right? It's this thing that's going to pop one day soon.
It's based on a day of speculation.
Yeah, and a lot of people are going to lose their money. And I think, I think there are people, the Wall Street Bets is made up of a whole bunch of people. Like, there are the good eggs, as you're talking about, Jamal, that are trying to, like, stick it to the man, trying to, like, illuminate the fact that Wall Street is rigged, right? Like, yes, regulate Wall Street, but also regulate the hedge funds, not just like the retail investors, right? But at the same time, there are people also in Wall Street Bets who are probably themselves like these wolves of Wall Street who are also making lots of money. Like, Elon Musk was rooting for this to happen. Like, it's all a game. It's a casino. And that's the whole problem with Wall Street from Jump Street.
And you have nefarious characters. You have characters who are like painted in the image of the leader. And Elon Musk ends up. I have my qualms with him because he's problematic on a bunch of other levels too, which is so strange that he courts edgelords without even trying, and it's so easy.
Well, because he's their high priest.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's like that's the thing. Like when you were reading about this, when I was like following this, it was like the strange bedfellows, right? Because you had like Elizabeth Warren and AOC in the same boat with Ted Cruz, and and Donald Trump Jr. was like tweeting on behalf of the Wall Street.
Ben Shapiro,
and it's just like,
gosh,
and he's trash. So
maybe I don't want them.
Absolute
but
garbage.
Again, it's this like, to your point, it's the same impulse. It's the same kind of like, it was just a wild thing.
I think it's because when it comes to money, that is where intersection you know, it reminds me of just old socio-politics and like it being about class and not really about like me being black and my neighbor being white and somebody being this, that, and the other. But if like we realize that we're after our wallets, we may come together. I don't know if that's the moral of the story here, but it seems to be some very strange like coming together of groups that we would have never thought would be on the same page.
That's what Biden was saying. He wanted unity. Biden wanted unity. This is the unity.
Right, this is the unity. This is all Biden.
Biden was just
baby.
Like, you know
what?
Queen Latifah's like, nah, man. Don't you? No, but the thing is, what's really happening, I mean, we can't, dismiss that this is a huge class issue because the rich white boys didn't want anybody else to play.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. And now they're playing the exact same game, and now you want to take your ball and go home, you spunk.
Yeah, they go to CNBC, really? Start crying about, like, again.
Start crybabying what you've been doing for years.
I love the tweets, all it takes. I saw someone tweet, the like dialogue kind of meme structure. It'd be like rich people, poor people just need to invest their money.
Yeah.
And then poor people start investing, and rich people are like, what?
Not like that.
What are you doing? So it's all that shit about but buy your bootstraps and using your money right and stop buying avocado toast in Starbucks. And people were saying this is probably one of the craziest moments of wealth redistribution that we would witness. There's not going to be another GME. There's not going to be another stock that does what GameStop does because there's probably going to be some regulation or some shit. There's going to be some congressional hearing that changes the rules. And, at the end of this, I feel like the retail traders are the ones who are going to be looked at more and scrutinized more than, of course, the hedge funders.
What I worry, like how the Dems will fuck this up, right? There aren't good faith arguments on any side because Elizabeth Warren put out this really thoughtful, nuanced letter the other day about how she thinks Wall Street needs to be more regulated. And then the same Wall Street bets folks, the people, rooting for them, started like, the Bernie Bros snake tweet started coming back out. And it was like, Elizabeth Warren's a traitor. It was like, did you read the fucking letter? She's on your side, bro. She's trying to say, we need to shut this whole thing down, And that goes back to that whole edgelord piece where like there is a segment of that subreddit that's all about what's in it for me. And they're not trying to stick it to the man. They are really just trying to make a buck.
They're trying to be the man.
Yeah.
They're trying to be the man, and they're trying to figure out how does somebody who lives in their mom's basement become super cool, right? And like it's interesting how this is also tied to the mythology of cool. You know what I did this weekend? I got some GameStop stock. and people are in the people are in the Reddit like people are in the Reddits and the subreddits like bragging about what they're doing and as if they're part of a cause. And what this really has showed me is that a lot of these people legit have nothing to do. There's like nothing for them to stand for. Like if they got so swept up in this, it makes you wonder like what's missing in your life that this becomes your lodestone.
Money. Right, money is
I guess, but I mean, like they know that it's ephemeral, right?
Well, it's also part of the uptick of doing this sort of thing that goes with the pandemic. I mean, can we fair? I mean, and people are doing more desperate and crazy things, like spend more time on Robinhood than they would.
And I think this is another example of like when fans get together on a subreddit and demand a thing, and then they get the thing, right? And this is also the year we're getting a Snyder Cut, and I think there's a straight line from like Snyder Cut to Wall Street Bets as well, right? Like it's this kind of like leveraging, not weaponizing, leveraging of one's fandom to get the thing you want. And so I bring up the Snyder Cut this week too because we learned that it's coming out March 18th.
March 18th, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I remember it was originally announced it was going to be a 4-part miniseries, but in actuality, it's going to drop as one 4-hour film.
Oh, yes.
We teased last week when we were going to talk about Ray Fisher, too. So I wanted to like shift the conversation from Wall Street Bets to the Snyder Cut now that we know it's coming out. I know that there's varying opinions on the Snyder Cut. I know, Jamal, you actually covered the Snyder Cut at Fandom last year when we were invited to take part in that whole virtual DC convention. So I know that you've kind of gone back and forth on Snyder's vision. So I just wanted to like, are we excited for the Snyder Cut? Are we not excited? Like, do we think that the cult of Zack Snyder is a healthy thing, or is that like also something that we have to worry about?
It's kind of crazy because his defenders his defenders a handful. I don't know. It's just hard to sort out the folks who I'm like, what the hell are you actually saying? You're saying some problematic shit here. But then there are also people who have used it as a dog whistle to go after Snyder, but then make these really bizarre claims, and I'm like, wait, you're not even talking about Zack Snyder anymore. You're just a problematic motherfucker. What are you talking about?
Well, I think to your point about even inside the Wall Street subreddit, like the Zack Snyder kind of, I shouldn't call them a cult because it is. That's I'm being
that's the GOP.
Right. That is a legit cult. The Zack Snyder
umbrella word. Cults are kinds of fandoms. Fandoms are kinds of cults.
But to Jamal, your point earlier about like there are some problematic people who are in that Snyder cult. There I go again. but at the same time they do use their fandom to like donate to suicide causes to raise money for good causes. So like. And not everyone who defends Zack Snyder is a problematic person. Not everyone who doesn't like Zack Snyder is a problematic person. Like, there's all kinds, right? And it's just hard to navigate that space in any direction.
Another thing that makes it hard is it's hard to untangle the different levels of bad, because I just think Justice League, however it shakes out, is sort of a bad movie that got reshot to be a different kind of bad movie, and along the way there was a lot of bad behavior probably in the filmmaking of it. So through those different layers of bad, I don't even know what a good result is. So that's why I find it hard to even know what to root for.
Right.
I'm not rooting for anything at this case. Of course I'll watch another 4-hour Justice League movie just for the fucking shit, because our pandemic protocols will still be in it'll still be in place then, and boy, that sounds like a fine way to pass half a day and have lots of opinions on something. And,
I feel like I'm an outlier. I love Man of Steel. I still love Man of Steel. I thought it was like gorgeous, and especially in comparison to just like everything else that came out after. I love Man of Steel. I don't know what happened after, and I feel like Martha still resonates so heavily with me that I could not buy into anything else. I watched everything DC that came out, and I was just like, man, what's happening? And then Wonder Woman made me feel like excited, and then 84 came out. It's 84, right?
The one that's the most recent.
Oh man, and then I'm like, so what's happening? And then we got reshoots, right? And then we have the Ray Fisher incident, which, to be honest, I'm totally out of the loop about. Like,
I don't think anyone really knows what's going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, can we say definitively? We have theories.
I just know that Joss Whedon is a dick.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Ray Fisher had a problem with Joss Whedon because we've seen Joss Whedon's racial politics in all of his shows.
For sure.
We've seen it. So I can see that being where the energy was.
Yeah, for sure. But my thing is that, like, I just feel like, yeah, Joss Whedon was definitely a problem. But then it was like Jeff Johns is a problem. Now Walter Hamada is a problem. It's like he just successfully keeps going up the chain at Warner Brothers.
There's no doubt that some bad behavior happened on the shooting of Justice League, because it's one of those like $80 billion movies that you just know was terrible to make under any circumstances. I'm not trying to like flatten out here, but I'm just trying to say it's those layers I can't untangle.
It's kind of like the Ahmad Best thing, right? I think that because as a black man, 95% of the time you're not going to be listened to. They're going to just say, "Oh, you're playing the race card. You're doing this." So if I'm like reading Ray Fisher, he sounds like someone who's desperate and who got zero help.
Sure.
Right? Something really shitty happened. No one protected him. No one had his back. And so he's trying to figure out, except for just Jason Momoa on a slant support, right? It wasn't full support, it was a slant support. And so I could see being so frustrated that you're just going to have to will somebody listen to me? Because no one's listening to this poor guy. Because each recitation of the event, there's somebody else gets brought in more. And it looks like he's picking his shots. He's like, well, shoot, I was throwing jabs before. Now let me throw a hand grenade. Like, because somebody has to get touched by this so this can be rectified in my soul. And I feel bad for him because I met the guy on an occasion. He's a nice guy. Yeah. Super nice, super sweet, super like dedicated, talented dude. And I know something horrible happened to him, but I don't think anybody, had his back. And he's just trying to figure out, like, what can I do to make sure, A, this doesn't happen again, and the truth get told. And I don't think we'll ever get the real truth.
Or justice.
It also, pun intended.
Martha.
It makes you think about the characters black women and men play and the issues that might come up and who will or won't listen to them because of their status, like I wonder if Cavill or Affleck had issues, how would that have gone down, right? I mean, again, I don't know like the nitty gritty. I don't know the details. I know he's name dropped people, and I know that he's had issues, and I don't know. But as you said, Shawn, it doesn't seem like anyone is or enough people are listening, or the people he wants to listen they don't seem to be paying attention.
Well, I mean, there are a couple. I mean, this is a human story about the perils of blockbuster filmmaking in this, old white guy controlled system. This shit is going to come up, and I'm not saying that to minimize it. I'm saying we shouldn't get it confused with our fandom analysis of Justice League or how much we want Justice League.
Right.
Because the problem is the overwhelming want for Justice League is going to want to smooth over all these problems. No, that's a human problem that should be addressed.
I mean, it's going to be really like awkward because he's said that he's not. I mean, he's basically blowing up his career. Like, let's be real. Like, he's even said this. Like, I don't care if my career is no more after this. I need to get the truth out. At the same time, he is going to be doing the promotion for Justice League because all accounts is that one of the things that suffered was the Cyborg storyline when Joss Whedon did the reshoots, and the Snyder Cut is going to restore a lot of Cyborg's story,
which is ironic because Cyborg's story is actually probably the most interesting inside the Justice League if you were to completely take a step back, and that might be part of it. I mean, like everybody else, you're a god, you're Batman, you're Superman, whatever. I mean, this guy like had half of a alien robot grafted to him, and he has problems with his dad. And he has all this stuff we didn't see, and among the many problems of Justice League, that was one of the.
But let's if we're gonna get into it, let's get into it then, because just how horrible of a character is Cyborg really, though? He's a cyber eunuch. He's a cyber eunuch with a broken home, an absent father. His sexuality is completely erased and replaced by metal. Like this, I mean, that's why I think David Walker's Cyborg run got canceled because he got nanotech and humanized him, and people were like, "That's not Cyborg. We want our chocolate units to stay eunuchs," And it's just like, and it's cold blooded because there's something about that character that when he got the nanotechnology and was able to like be a monster on the inside, so to speak, but human on the outside, there was something there that was actually way more compelling than just another Justice League heavy hitter. And trying to elevate him to the Justice League, I'm talking comics now, elevating him from the Teen Titans was really more, not even fan service, it was who can we put in next to the Trinity who's not going to be sexy, who's not going to be romantic competition, right? And so they throw the eunuch, the digital cyber eunuch in there. Like, he didn't even have his own powers. He actually was taken over by something else. He was still a slave to a degree. Like, that whole character, especially in that film, was super problematic.
Wait, which version did he get the nanotech in? I'm sorry.
David Walker's comic.
I think it was maybe 14 issues, maybe? Or am I wrong? I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
I mean, David's Cyborg comic run is probably the best, like, version of Victor Stone in any media. Like... the cartoons, live action, I like Cyborg on Doom Patrol enough, but like the David Walker comic run is for sure. Like if you haven't read it, I suggest you can. I think you can find it. I think it came out in trade. But
it's called Unplugged, and I think it may only be one volume. I think.
Yeah, it's definitely worth a read. And David talked about this when he took on the project. Like everything you said about Cyborg, he said like that's part of why he got the gig because he wanted to make Cyborg a real character and not
kind of a token. He's been tokenized in the Justice League framework, and I mean, I totally agree with you, Shawn. I mean, like, I guess I would say, like, there's a lot of potential there if we were looking at like our ideal version.
And I think his performance, even in the Whedon cut, is probably the best performance in that film.
Oh, it was so nuanced. I mean, like I said, but there's something about if he had a bit more control. Because like, why is he the only one at the mercy of their abilities as opposed to in control of them, right? Like, Superman gets to fly and revel in like, my favorite part in that entire movie is when, actually, I get Batman, I get them all confused, actually, now that I think about it.
Yeah,
but
same.
Whatever movie it was where Doomsday was in and punched Wonder Woman and she smiled.
Yeah, that's Batman versus
and got back, like, that's like that's the best, like, I was like, oh, that's a dope characterization. And the warehouse fight.
And that's
which is the best Batman fight in the history of Batman on
Batman
screen.
Versus Superman.
Yeah, but related, I'd argue the best part of Justice League.
Okay, so I don't like Justice League then. I guess I don't like Justice League.
But in Justice League, Whedon cut, the single best part is where Wonder Woman headbutts Superman. I mean, that part is gold, and all the rest sucks. I mean, for me.
And Aquaman sitting on the lasso was pretty funny.
Yeah,
that's perfectly
that's
funny.
definitely a Whedon.
But we also
yeah.
And it circled back. I will end up sounding in favor of the Snyder Cut here because we all saw what could have happened. We all saw potential in all those parts and all the different heroes' arcs. Anyway, and presumably we're going to see it in this 4-hour version.
It also gets me frustrated to think of, like, at least in the movie, when he's just like, I can't control. I don't know why it's doing this thing. It was in Justice League, right? When Cyborg, the system is just controlling.
Then he shoots Superman and pisses him off. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it's
the
like I
mother
can't
box
control.
thing,
Like I can't do anything with this. Like I could fly for a quick moment just to show you, the audience, that I learned how to fly overnight, but I cannot control this cannon. And it reminds me of like Eddie Brock. Eddie Brock he's got something taking control over him to a degree, but this is like cool and it's helpful. And he's like, I can't really control myself, but I'll eat these humans, and it'll be like a cool experience.
Like a turd in the wind.
Super. Right. So, like, what are you really doing with this character?
Well,
and I think people
to be fair to Ray Fisher, he never had to say that line. Like a turd in the wind.
What the?
I can't believe that's actually a line in a real movie.
But also he had to do this surely tech support thing at the end where he's just like dealing with the mother box bomb or something, and then he gets like horribly just torn apart. His cyborg bits like rent limb from limb. It's just all bad.
Yeah. So Jamal, you are more on the Snyder side. Like you like Man of Steel. You said I like 2/3 of Man of Steel. I don't like the third, but I that's not a Snyder dig. I don't like the third act of most superhero movies.
yeah. I think it's just because it's really hard to stick. Like what? I mean, I'll ask right after, just briefly saying the DC fandom, that really is what built the hype for me, and I really bought in as they were aiming for, because I'm MCU boy, and I'm just like, oh yeah, shitty DC films.
Disney shill. You're a Disney shill.
All day. Get that on a t-shirt for me, please. But like, I was totally sold. I appreciate it. And then also, like, holy shit, man, you're in the middle of filming this and this tragedy hits you. So I think about that all the time. And I think about that when people are so ruthless toward him on Twitter, and I'm just like, man, what?
I don't know the guy. I don't like the guy's films, but if you're gonna go after this dude's tragedy,
like
you're trash. Like, come on, really?
Like, what?
Why would you even think that was okay? Because why? Because your name is Duck Quack 47 behind the screen.
1178787. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, post your address and then let's have a different conversation.
All of everyone, and that happens so much. But to go back to what I was going to ask earlier, and what you had mentioned earlier too, Keith, it's what third act has stuck for y'all? Like, what was a third act you're just like, man? I mean, besides like Black Panther and Into the
Even
Spider-Verse.
Black Panther's third act, I don't like.
But in comparison to,
for sure.
Shazam! I think Shazam third act holds up.
Birds of Prey third act is my favorite.
Birds of Prey third act holds up.
Like, one of the reasons Birds of Prey is my favorite comic movie is like the tone is consistent from top to bottom.
Oh yeah.
I think we talked about this, Dominic, on our Birds of Prey episode. Of the many Birds of Prey episodes that we did before we went on hiatus.
I was like, just one episode? What
yeah,
we
did
about?
like 5 of them, I think. But like, the moments where the different characters finally come together, they're all on their way to the amusement park. I love the third act of Birds of Prey. But like, yeah, it's rare. Like that Birds of Prey is I think Endgame I think works. The third act of Endgame works.
Jamal, by third act, do you mean like more expands in excitement or gives most resolution to the character stuff you're expecting? Because I mean, there's a lot of third acts have more explosions.
Well, that's the problem. I think most third acts devolve into just like explodey CGI fest, right? Like that's the problem with Wonder Woman, is that it everything that they got right for the first 2/3 of Wonder Woman, they kind of throw out the window when she fights digital Professor Lupin. And the problem with like Man of Steel, I think, is when like I think Man of Steel, the first 2/3 of Man of Steel is Zack Snyder at his most restrained. He doesn't overindulge, and then he gets to like Metropolis and says, explodey, buildings falling down.
I'm tired of doing this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm tired. I'm like,
before he becomes Superman, I'm really into this movie.
Yeah, I like Man of Steel a lot, the first 2/3.
Stealing the clothes off the rat, like all these little small character moments that kind of reminded me of like, the Christopher Reeve parts. I like the character moments. I thought were pretty dope.
I do think the Pa Kent dying in a tornado is dumb, but that's another podcast.
That's silly. Because if you can go super speed, ain't nobody gonna know.
See you. Yeah.
Like, come on.
I mean, period. Yeah, I feel that I'm at this stage where if I watch a film like Tenet, I'm going to approach it and suspend my disbelief differently than I would an MCU or a DCEU film. And I'm just like, when do I come back down? Because I couldn't think of a third act that stuck for me, but I still enjoyed watching all of these movies for the most part. And Dom, I couldn't even answer. I don't know if it's about the resolution or if it's just like too much shit getting blown up. But as long as it's not as bad as, like a Suicide Squad or something like that, then I could stomach it.
Well, I mean, I just asked because I want to elaborate on the point a little bit because, I mean, this is sort of borrowing from another podcast. But like one of the funny things about the comic book adaptations as a whole is like the comic book genre is sort of a 2-act without a third act setup. I mean, this, because it's a serialized story that goes on forever and ever, in a way, our point of most satisfaction is somewhere in the second act when we fully realized superhero and doing his fun in games. And then, so we have a love-hate thing with the third act as a concept, just like the endings of things.
Right.
And there are all these attempts to bring the end of the hero, kill him like 17 different times, but he always comes back to life. That's just the conceptual part of it.
Yeah. No, I get that. And I don't know that it's like lack of resolution or anything like that. I think it really is just like in most superhero movies, the third act is when they have to like have the big fight, right? Like everything builds up to that. And then to Shawn's point, I think a lot of times character moments get lost. Like for me, my problem with Man of Steel is that just the overindulgent action set pieces at the end is just too much. It's one thing if like one building, like we saw, we experienced 9/11. We saw what it's like when buildings fall down in a city, right? The scale of destruction at the end in Metropolis is just beyond comprehension, that it gets to a point where it's like, it's not even, you don't feel anything anymore, right?
You said it before, restrained.
He was so restrained for the first 90 minutes of that movie.
He broke out. He was like, "Oh, get out of here!"
Well, that's the feature film's shorthand for third act. For better forces, just to have more things explode.
In the script, it says everything explodes.
Everything that previously wasn't exploded explodes, and that's the end of the movie. But that's a short.
But but to your point about Batman versus Superman, like I don't like that film at all, but I do like that they did recontextualize the third act of Man of Steel for the first act of Batman vs. Superman, where you see it from Bruce Wayne's point of view the utter destruction of Metropolis. And, it's still overindulgent. Like, I do think, Zack Snyder is in the Michael Bay school of directing, where it's just like, how over the top can I go? And that's fine. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not going to criticize that necessarily. It's not my cup of tea, but you actually get those character moments, right? When you see Bruce's perspective of buildings falling down. And I think, I always said, I think my problem with Batman vs. Superman is that whole movie, Ben Affleck should have been playing Lex Luthor. Because to me, the one thing I told myself out of Man of Steel was that, like, this sets up a perfect introduction of Lex Luthor, where he comes in and he's the hero, and the city of Metropolis looks at Superman as a bad guy, right? Because he allowed all this destruction to happen. And that sets up Lex Luthor to come in. And I think if Ben Affleck shaved his head and played Lex Luthor and did everything he did in Batman vs. Superman, that would have been a perfect Lex Luthor, because he's like this rich guy who hates Superman, who wants to kill him, creates a kryptonite battle armor suit to take him down. Like, that would be totally a perfect
right. That's
Lex
just
Luthor
what Lex Luthor does.
Yeah. I think for me, I think Ben Affleck doesn't get the credit he deserves. He wasn't the best Bruce Wayne. He was an incredible Batman. Like, even though I'm not a big fan of the suit and all the bulkiness of it, because Batman's supposed to be a stealth fighter, and you can't be a stealth fighter when you're like, hello, you look at the
You're too big to fit through the door, or the vent, or the the heating vent.
Well, that's because Zack Snyder also loves to fetishize CrossFit, and you had to have that 20-minute CrossFit scene to show just how big.
Yeah, but
like
and he's a big dude, But for me, like, I still stand by the thing I wrote for NOC. I don't know how many years ago, that you should have started small. You should have started with The Question as the first movie. A nice $25 million movie where Batman is a rumor and Superman is an idea, and you use The Question to weave in a larger conspiracy. I think you could have kept it, because I think the problem with the Zack Snyders and the rest in these films is that they have too much money, and the money hose takes place of the imagination.
I agree.
That's why I'm looking at, like, what thing was Matt Vaughn? Is that his name? The guy who's directing Batman?
Matt Reeves, yeah.
Matt Reeves, I'm sorry.
A smaller scale Batman movie. That's what I'm excited for.
It looks incredible.
Yeah, but they wanted to expedite it. They wanted to expedite the process, right? To keep up with. I mean, this is on the tail end, not on the tail, but on the heels of like the MCU gearing up for the Endgame. You got Infinity War, and it's just like taking so much attention away from.
But it's like Ja Rule trying to follow Jay-Z. Like you're gonna drop a Ja Rule album after the Blueprint. Like that's a dumb mistake.
But you need to know who you are. Then you know what I mean. In that moment, Ja Rule could just be like, you know what, I'm Ja Rule. Let me accept that for right now, and I can work my way up to maybe just above Ja Rule.
Or let me just drop a single. Let me drop an EP.
Oh, yes.
Don't let me drop an entire thing on the thing. Because the thing is, what this new Batman trailer, even though. If Batman took that long to dispatch somebody, he'd be dead in 5 minutes, right? Batman's like he's a one-hitter quitter. That's who Batman is. But there's something about this more intimate, more almost like Zodiac Killer 7-esque Batman that I'm like, finally.
That's what
Even though I'm a huge Burton Batman fan, but this it looks mad creepy, kind of like. I watched the trailer again. I watched it like, on my phone, then I watched it on my giant television. I was like, yo, like even the atmospherics of it, and I wasn't sold on Robert Pattinson, but I'm like, you know what? He just might be the baddest dude to do it.
Oh, this looks nice.
Always wanted it like a small scale Batman solves a murder movie. That's like the fate of the city, the fate of the world doesn't have to be at stake. It just there's a family who's suffering, and Batman has to save a little girl or find a serial killer. Like that's the Batman move I've always wanted.
Those contained ones allow for that characterization that people were looking for, and I think those are like the ones that hit the most. And again, I know Nolan's are treated like differently. Those are on the outskirts of all of this.
Yeah, they're the artists.
But shit, I love them. To your point earlier, Shawn, I thought they were going for like Frank Miller's Batman, which is why they're going like this.
Well, yeah,
and that's exactly what it is.
Diesel,
and that's
right.
We can have we can talk about the problematic of the Dark Knight. There's a whole lot to talk about there. I mean they are, but I think that the Batman's supposed to be the baddest martial artist there is in the DCU. He's supposed to be the stealthiest guy. I've never seen Batman be sneaky. You got a damn tank rolling on buildings. That's not stealth. You got a motorcycle that sounds like a damn Harrier jet. That's not stealth. I was a fan
of the beefy bat.
But I mean, you're right though. I mean, like I think it is like that Frank Miller. But if you're gonna do the Frank Miller thing, then you have to tell a Frank Miller story, right? You have to get down into that.
I think they want the imagery without the story, and then they'll make the story themselves and sort of just like shoehorn this thing that doesn't.
And it doesn't work. It's like putting the wrong puzzle pieces together.
And my whole thing about Frank Miller, and I've said this on this podcast before, I feel like we've been there, done that. There are other versions of Batman, and we've done the Frank Miller Batman. Like Tim Burton said he was inspired by The Dark Knight Returns. Christopher Nolan said he was inspired by The Dark Knight Returns. Zack Snyder was obviously inspired by Dark Knight Returns. Do you know there's a Denny O'Neil Batman? You know, there's a Paul Dini Batman. Like, there are other Greg Rucka Batman, Ed Brubaker Batman. I want those Batman stories. I'm tired of Frank Miller's Batman. He's not the only person to write Batman.
But there's too many Batman at this point. Like, holy shit, man.
I mean, look, holy shit, so Batman Dark Knight Returns is already done with this PhD program, is already tenured. Like, that's how old it is. It's 35 years old. Like,
really? Like, come on.
We're done. Like, my favorite Batman ever, and I know it's problematic with Native American people, but it's the Batman. There used to be this series called Legends of the Dark Knight where they told like these 4 or 5 issue stories. And it's like this Native American myth about how Batman comes to be. That or Batman Venom are like my 2 favorite Batman stories. And like, there are these very small, very intimate, but still gives enough of the... Because I never looked at Batman as a superhero. He's a detective. He's a vigilante detective. So let's get more into that. Like, I mean, we don't need any more Frank Miller. And for me, like for Superman, all these articles and all these hot takes about how you can't write a good Superman film. Like, have you not read For Tomorrow? Like, have you not read... Like, there's so many wonderful Superman stories that to adapt or to draw from. Don't create it out of whole cloth when you actually don't love the characters.
They want the explosion.
I think that's the fundamental difference. I think going back to your point about how DC was trying to catch up to Marvel, and I think the fundamental difference is that there is a sense in Warner Brothers that there's a sense of shame of who these characters are. That's why it always leans towards the grimdark. You know, like we don't.
Yes.
It's why, you know, as corny as it can be, like the CW tone gets it right. Where like, you know, Arrow and Flash and Supergirl and Blacklight, like they all have their own different versions, but they can all work together, just like the comics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
think like Legends of Tomorrow is fun.
Right.
Like, it's Looney Tunes, mind you, but
like
it's
literally
fun.
Looney Tunes, like a giant Bebo fighting.
Yes, it is. It's literally.
But you know what I mean? Like Zack Snyder has said, like, I can't put the red underwear on Superman because it's not cool. And like Superman's not supposed to be cool. Is the whole thing.
Well, you wear a tie and a vest with jeans. You were talking about not cool. Like, come on, fam. Like, word?
Hey, I thought we're not attacking Zack Snyder on this podcast.
I'm not. I'm just attacking his dress. But don't say it's not cool when you. But don't say something's not cool when you're not cool. I mean,
but
like, no disrespect.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a sense of like, the reason Shazam I think works for you, Shawn, is that they're not ashamed of like the corniness of the character, right? Whereas like
because the whole Shazam universe is mad corny.
Whereas like everyone else, like you can tell, and I'm not saying it's Zack Snyder or Christopher Nolan. It's like Warner Brothers as a studio, I think has a sense of like, these are like kiddie characters. We need to make them more adult. It's why, again, aside from the racism, I think a lot of people don't like Wonder Woman 84 because it's intentionally cheesy, right? Like it's trying to be Richard Donner Superman. Like the first 20 minutes of Wonder Woman 84 is a straight up Richard Donner movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and then it goes into Linda Carter.
Yeah, and that's
right.
It's intentional though. Like I think they want let's be campy, and I think we talked about this in the last podcast before we broke for our hiatus, but I was talking about reconsidering Joel Schumacher and appreciating the fact that he was intentionally making like a campy Batman movie. And
for me, how many queer kids got into superheroes because of that film.
Yeah, for sure.
But also, how many people came out like as that was like a dog whistle too? Like, look what the fuck they're doing to Batman.
Oh
like,
yeah, it was thinly veiled homophobia. I think a lot of the criticism.
Yes, absolutely. And then it just now is no longer thinly veiled. They're just like, fuck that, fuck those versions.
Yeah.
They're just
So, I mean, that's all. I think, and with Marvel, like they embrace the corny with the serious, and I think that's the sweet spot DC is trying to figure out. And I think the CW shows have figured out like how to blend the corny and the serious.
And they need a new world runner. Like Jeff Johns should step down.
Well, yeah. Well, and that's I
mean, that's a whole other story.
That's what Ray Fisher's trying to do. But
true.
But speaking of the Tim Burton Batman, I was so excited for the announcement of Flashpoint and how they're bringing Michael Keaton in, and they're embracing the multiverse, because that's the one thing DC has always had above like Marvel was always the book where all the characters interact. Like you could see Avengers Tower in the background of a Spider-Man comic, or you could see the backstory.
Exactly.
And like the cinematic universe was always the Marvel thing, whereas DC was always the Flash of Two Worlds and Earth 2 and wildly different Batmans across generations. And they're finally, DC is embracing the multiverse. Like you had Crisis on Infinite Earths on TV last year. Now there's Flashpoint with Flash and Michael Keaton. And I think Ben Affleck's going to be in that movie. There's going to be like 3 different Batmans. And all this, I say all this to say, like I'm so proud that DC was embracing the multiverse. And here comes Marvel, like, coming in under the wires, and guess what? We're getting Toby, Andrew, and Tom in a Spider-Man movie. We're embracing the multiverse before you motherfuckers came.
I mean, so if DC wanted to redeem themselves, I think they need to shut down production of everything. I mean, like, let the Batman everything come out, but and don't try to copy Marvel, because when DC is, I mean, granted, you have Deadpool and Deathstroke and Thanos and Darkseid. There's a lot of copying back and forth of the characters, but do not copy their narrative strategy, because Marvel did something that was unprecedented. Like, we have to give Marvel, and I'm not a huge Marvel fan, but you have to give Marvel their absolute props for doing 20 years of interconnected story. Not 20 years. Was it 20 years?
10 years,
films.
20 movies.
10 years and 20 films of interconnected stories of these relationships that we grew with these characters. I mean, like, it will never happen again. Like, I don't think, because
that's why, though.
I think
that's why DC is on the. I think that's why DC has this like expeditious response, because if that's not going to happen again, what the hell are they going to do for 10 years? How do they stay? I don't want to say not relevant, but you're saying don't copy their game plan, right? So don't copy a successful game plan. You come up with your own. What the hell does that look like?
Well, because it hasn't worked. There's evidence that their copying Marvel doesn't work.
Well, that's
there's
what
evidence.
I thought. Like, with them embracing the multiverse is them finally putting a stake in the ground. But again, here comes Marvel. Like, we're going to do the multiverse too.
Let me show you something. Yeah.
And I feel like the Spider-Man multiverse movie is going to come out before.
I think that's part of the healthy competition that gives you things like Deadpool and Deathstroke. And actually, I'd be like tickled if that happened between the two movie wings.
Well, it's funny too because like Dominic, you're the resident Spidey nerd.
A little bit.
You know, before Miles Morales and Into the Spider-Verse as a film, like, was Spider-Man ever considered the multiverse character? It's just so funny to me that, like, of all the characters in the Marvel Universe, it's Spider-Man that's the one that's, like, most associated with, like, the multiverse. And I don't know if it's just because of, like, the success of Into the Spider-Verse.
Well, just because there were so many good alternate versions of him that you couldn't let it go. You had to explore them because people were really successful at creating alternate takes like Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen. And I'll even venture to say, like, Miles Morales really made us consider the, just expanded our minds that two guys could be named Spider-Man. It's a simple thing, but just the fact that they're both Spider-Man and we're saying, is it confusing? No, there's just two guys named Spider-Man.
Right.
And there's a certain parody there that, you didn't have to be like variation like, Phantom Spider-Man or Spider-Boy, Spider-Teen. You didn't have to do the variation. The name could be shared. I like that myself. But yeah, no, not like sensually like a multi-dimensional character, but just given to so many different interpretations, sort of lends itself to that.
Yeah, because we saw the whackness that was Heroes Reborn. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't do that, but Spider-Man has like, Peter Parker and even Peter Porker, those comics are hilarious. Yeah. I mean, like you have all of these great. I mean, so for him to be the multiverse nexus point kind of makes sense. I would argue that if you ever made a good Fantastic Four film, they could have been the ones because they're explorers.
They could have been. Oh my gosh, they could have been.
It just because to not be able to do a good Fantastic Four film breaks my heart because that's like.
Well, it's coming.
One of my favorite books of all time.
It's coming. Well, and I think from a cinematic perspective, it only makes sense with Spider-Man because he's the only character in the Marvel live-action universe that has been able to be portrayed by multiple people, right? Like, that's the reason why I thought DC should have embraced this a long time ago because DC's, famously has all of these different people playing these same characters over generations, right? Because DC's kind of been the movie adaptation for much longer than Marvel. Could you go all the way back to George Reeves and Adam West in previous decades? So it's interesting. Not long now we'll get Justice League and Flashpoint is supposed to start filming soon. So it's definitely a new time for comic book movies, and it's the perfect time to strike because like Marvel I think is in a to be fair, we said this last week, Marvel's kind of in a liminal space right now after Endgame and what comes next is and
after the passing of Chadwick Boseman.
Like Black Panther was supposed to be the torchbearer.
Phase 2 or Phase 4 or whatever.
Phase whatever at this point.
Phase 4.
But like where is the future of Marvel? Is it going to have the same resonance as it did without Chris Evans? Even though rumors are he's coming back. We'll see if that's true.
Yeah.
But without Robert Downey Jr., without Chadwick Boseman, can you still have the same kind of cultural resonance going forward? We'll see. But we'll end it there. We can always come back next week. Until then, what's nerd popping for you guys? Jamal.
I'm ready for this GameStop shit to skyrocket.
You got your one share.
I got my one share, and I promise y'all, I'm going to take care of everybody. When this one share takes off, we're all getting paid. So that is
everybody gets consignment Converse.
Everyone gets some. So that is it for me. Wall Street Bets. Let's see what y'all do.
Dominic, what's nerd popping?
I don't have a big nerd popping, but just to circle back to WandaVision for a second. Are we excited about the Monica Rambeau thing? I'm excited about the concept of the Monica Rambeau character because I think she is especially overpowered in the comics. I mean, her concept is like a kind of ultimate dominating superpower, and I just wonder how they'll convey that.
I'm excited that she's going to have a big part in Captain Marvel 2. Nia DaCosta has said that she's in it. Kamala Khan's in it. Like, they're really taking like the legacy Captain Marvel characters into one movie, and I think having a black woman direct Captain Marvel, it's about time, Marvel Studios.
Yeah, I hope they treat black people better because the way they treated Nick Fury in Captain Marvel was literally just like, and the way they treated Wakanda in Endgame, it's like, really?
Right.
Oh
well, that's
gosh.
what I'm saying. That's why we finally get some black people behind the scenes on Captain. And Captain Marvel 1 wasn't my favorite Marvel movies, but I'm very excited for Captain Marvel 2. Shawn, what's nerd popping?
I got this book called Lost Transmissions: The Secret History of Science Fiction and Fantasy by Desirina Kosovich, and Jeff Vandermeer did the forward. And it's such a wonderful. You have people like Charlie Jane Anderson here, and Lev Grossman, and John Jennings, the homie, and John Chu, and William Gibson talking about little known parts of science fiction history and fantasy history. And it's an absolutely astonishing book. I love this book. I think if you're really interested in like the culture, for me, it's just one of those things that, like, as a critic, as a professor, this is a book that I'll probably will actually assign this coming fall, because I think it's such a valuable look. It's like the shining the light on like hidden parts of sci-fi and fantasy that we probably would never really care about. And it's such a wonderful book called Lost Transmission. So if you want to get it.
Oh yeah, I love me some sci-fi.
So what's nerd popping, Keith?
I was watching this thing on Hulu called In and of Itself. It's the filmed version of the stage play. This like one-man show, magic show about this guy, Derek Delgado. It's really fascinating. It was directed by Frank Oz. It ran for like in 2018. It closed off Broadway. I think they did some shows in LA. But it's this magician named Derek Delgado. He was actually a consultant on Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, I think.
Oh, wow.
All the Christopher Nolan film I really liked, actually.
And what's interesting is that, like, I'm a sucker for like close-up magic, but it's not just like a magic show. It's not just like David Blaine, right? Like he weaves these narratives throughout, and it's very personal. He talks about being ashamed of his mother who was out when he was a child. And he talks about like, identity. There's this whole, one of the things that like the audience does when you first walk into the theaters, there are all these cards that says I am something, and then you just have to choose your identity as you walk into the theater, and then he does something with that at the end of the show. It's really fascinating. It's like, again, it's unlike any magic show you'll ever see, and I don't know if you guys are into like illusions and magic.
I love magic.
It's definitely worth checking out. It's called In and of Itself on Hulu, and if you have Hulu, I suggest checking that out. So
nice.
That's it for Hard NOC Life. If you want to follow our co-hosts, how can they do that? Dominic, how can they find you on the interwebs?
I'm just Dominic Ma at DOMMAH.
Jamal?
I am at XPROSPERE on Twitter. I'm going to come up with a different name, I promise. Something easier, because I keep forgetting.
How do you say it if you say that as one word? How do you say it?
So X Prosper, but then I'm just like,
that's not that bad.
What the hell?
That's cool. That sounds like a Shakespearean X-Men title.
The Shakespearean X-Men. That should just be your like subtitle.
X-Men. I'm gonna take that one.
Forsooth, my X-Men, come hither.
Shawn Taylor.
I am at Real Love Punk, and I'm also a host of the weekly podcast called Surviving Creativity. Please give it a listen if you're getting stuck.
What's coming up on the podcast?
So this next podcast drops on Tuesdays about pushing your stunt button and how to be able to actually own your dopeness, because we live in a world where you get lauded for talking about how damaged you are. But if you talk about how dope you are, people think you are horrible and they want to take you down. But I'm like, you don't want to go the full Kanye, mind you, because nobody wants to go the full Kanye. But the reality is, there's an essay I referenced there called In Defense of Kanye's Vanity by this author called Heben Nagatu. It's one of the best pieces of writing I've read in years, from 2013 on BuzzFeed. But it's this idea that it's okay to be happy and claim that you're good at something. It doesn't mean that you're dissing somebody else. It just means that it's okay. And if you don't have people who can rock with you in support of you when you're excited about your accomplishments, you got to get rid of them.
That reminds me, I need to get you, friend of the NOC, Mark Bernardin. He has a t-shirt that says "Be humble, but let a motherfucker know." I need to get that shirt.
I need that shirt.
I need to get you that shirt. I'm going to ask Mark if I can get you
I need that.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_chow. Follow the Nerds of Color at the Nerds of Color. Go to hardknockmedia.com to find this and all the podcasts in the Hard NOC Media family, including Southern Fried Asian, which just dropped a new episode. I talked to KB Vu, who is an activist and organizer in the great state of Georgia, who helped Georgia turn blue in 2020 and 2021. So check that out. Like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere you get podcasts. We're also on YouTube, youtube.com/nerdscolor. You can listen to this podcast there and check out all the dope videos. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys next week.
The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with a different perspective. Watch it on your your screen, hit play, so check this. This is the Hard NOC Life, but not the chicken kind. More like the people in